Hey, this is Notser, and we're going to be talking about the CV rework gameplay. Wargaming showed it off a couple days ago. I want to leave my thoughts. The gameplay in the background is the example that they showed off. This video is sponsored by RQL. RQL is hosting a fast-paced tournament called Shipstorm Saturday. The tournament takes place September 8th at 4 p.m. Eastern on the North American server. Teams of 3 will face off in Tier 7 and Tier 8 ships on small maps with a maximum battle time of 15 minutes. Players on the team which takes first place will each receive 9,000 doubloons with ample rewards for second and third. For more information, join the Shipstorm Saturday Discord at the link in the video description. Now, I'll be leaving feedback, and I would appreciate if you've got some feedback, leave it as well in the comments. But if your feedback entails RTS or you're leaving the game, well, you are leaving the game. I hope you can find another game that's more for you, but this is gonna cease to be your game if you have to have it as an RTS control scheme for the aircraft carrier. That's just not going to exist anymore. And I feel bad for you, but you know what? It's happened to me before. Some game went a direction that I just wasn't feeling, and I moved on. It's probably what you need to do if you're so stuck on it being an RTS. Alright, so let's discuss the gameplay that they showed so we could hopefully develop some feedback that would be useful to improve it already. Now, one of the first things that I notice is that seeing 12 aircraft on the screen, that's what dominates your point of view. And unfortunately, Wargaming, you have not associated any of the customization for the player to benefit from on the aircraft part of the aircraft carrier. So I think what you need to do is you need to open that up and offer more customization for the way the aircraft appear in the world. Otherwise, this is going to be a very, very boring vanilla experience for most players. And I know you've associated the aircraft carrier itself with your camouflage and all of the cosmetic signal flags, but the fighters, the dive bombers, the torpedo bombers, the rocketeers, they're too close for the player to not have more customization on their appearance. That's one of the first things that's very glaring to me. But visually, this is far more interesting. If we're just going to take all of the gameplay out of it, all the emotion out of it, if I'm coming over and looking at this game for the very first time, this is far more impressive visually than the previous version. RTSs are basically a dying breed of genre, and there's a reason for that. Most of the time, they're not done very good, and also, they're pulled back from the gameplay so much that you can't really appreciate it as much as maybe you would like. It's just the nature of the business, and that's just where it's gone. So a lot of the, if they would just fix all the bugs, maybe they don't have people with enough experience to fix all of the RTS bugs. We're talking about a genre that really feels dead. There's only 2, 3, or 4 games, honestly, that I could list that even have a real, true RTS example. And that's about it. It's really sad. I grew up on RTSs, but I would much prefer this expression of aircraft carrier gameplay than an RTS, just for the simple fact I don't really get to appreciate that I'm playing against actual player-controlled ships. It feels so drawn back that I might as well be attacking a pixel. So I really appreciate the visual fidelity improvement in this entire expression. We've got dive bombers who are gaining altitude and then dropping down, and they're focusing on the dive. And I love that. I love that experience. It looks so cool visually. It is a little awkward that they gain altitude abruptly and then they go back down. I think it would be also very cool, Wargaming, if you could sort of follow the bomb after. Hopefully Z or Z can do just that. But I think this visually is very cool. I think you need to sort of desync the fighters a little bit so it feels a little bit more natural. It's sort of a uncanny valley situation. If you're not familiar with this term, a lot of animators and animation, you've got to make stuff feel real. What makes stuff feel real? Well, when they're not animated exactly the same. And that's one thing that I notice. All of the aircraft are very stiff. They all are doing the exact same movements. They're just in different positions. I think if you just offered a little bit more of a delay between each individual's animation, it would feel more natural. Best example, when these 3 dive bombers go up and then down, maybe they don't all do it at the exact same moment. Maybe they are all trying to aim for the same motion, but humans inherently have milliseconds of delay between their actions, make it a part of this design. I love the UI elements, Wargaming. I feel like it communicates very well. The health of the aircraft, far better. So I've heard that what they're going to do is they're going to have this sort of health bar at the bottom. It flashes blue whenever the squadrons go back to return to their ship. It will change from green, yellow, red, orange, depending on the health of the aircraft. And they also described it as a healthy aircraft will have it'll look perfect. A slightly damaged aircraft will be spewing a little bit of white smoke. A more heavily damaged aircraft will be spewing some black smoke. And then an aircraft that is, millimeters from death, they're going to be spewing a lot of fire. And I think that's great. I think it would be very cool for all that to kick in at different times, so the aircraft have different stages of damage. I thought that the flak looks very cool. However, they basically have the AA disabled for a lot of these examples, so it's just merely there for a visual fidelity. There's no actual counterplay that's going on, and there's going to be a lot more counterplay than what you see here, whereas you have to navigate through the flak and sort of make yourself the safest attack strategy. You can't just fly directly up to a ship and take no damage. That's just not going to happen. But it looks great. Wargaming, I really appreciate the visual fidelity increase. This is far more intriguing to me as a player and as an artist. I just think this is more interesting to look at. Okay, so I've talked about what it looks like visually to me. Things that I think they have to change. The carrier has to be more involved. You can't just go to a tactical map and waypoint the carrier. That's just not going to fly. Okay, I feel like the carrier should be considered far more than this current implementation is suggesting. I think that you should be able to see the carrier for itself, just as you can see the fighters. The whole point of this is to improve the player's feeling of controlling an aircraft carrier and controlling aircraft, and you're not going to feel that for the carrier. So I would absolutely focus on giving the player the option to control the aircraft carrier in a more personal manner. I also would definitely prefer it if Wargaming would offer some sort of fake waypoint that you could set to allow your aircraft to fly to a section that doesn't give directly away your carrier. No matter what you are suggesting or think you can do, Wargaming, there's always going to be a little tell from the 3 aircraft that fly directly back to the carrier. Even if they go super high in the sky, and after that initial attack, there's no way that anyone could possibly have an idea of where they actually are. They are giving you a direct course and heading in that instant where they've dropped their payload. So you cannot conceal it enough. It needs to be concealed more. There needs to be more of a strategic element for the carrier. A carrier would never allow their aircraft to directly fly back if they've got fuel and if someone is trying to follow them. They would never do that. Absolutely unacceptable. Now, maybe the aircraft have no idea that they're being followed. That's completely different, but the initial drop, it's just too obvious, okay? I love that Wargaming gave a activation window. Initially, I was like, yeah. But if you consider that all of this flak is stuff that you don't want to sail or fly through. If you fly through that, you're basically dead. And it's basically turned off for this. Just keep that in mind. I didn't like that Wargaming basically attacked AI-controlled ships that didn't do anything to actually protect themselves. I would love to have seen an example of counterplay. I would also have loved to have seen what the player looks like or what decisions are available to the player once a squadron is wiped out or is on a return course. We don't know any of that. I hope that when the squadron is returning, I have the choice to choose between any of the remaining. So I hope that I don't have to wait for the torpedo to rearm. I can sort of decide if I want rockets or a dive bomb, or the torpedo, depending on who I was using and wasn't using, to better address whatever is the problem in that moment. You know, maybe the rocket aircraft are better for destroyers, and the torpedo are better for battleships, and the dive bombers are better for cruisers. I would hope that the player is given that choice more freely than what they currently have with the aircraft carrier. Basically, the aircraft carrier is, if your squadron isn't up and doing something, you are making a mistake. And I appreciate that they've gone to one squadron, because I feel like that is going to alleviate all of the concerns with the scouting. Yes, it is legitimate strategy, and that's what RTS is known for. You have multiple units that you can control and maintain good vision of the game, but that vision is really unhealthy for a wargaming product. They rely heavily on people being concealed by their own sort of fog of war. If you are super high tier and you've got 8 squadrons, well, it's really easy to keep a lot of people visually spotted. So I appreciate that. I know that's not going to make people happy because it takes complexity out of the game. They can add in so much complexity through the AA counterplay and also the aiming reticle. They could make it bigger or smaller, more precise, more consistent. Maybe there's no RNG related to this at all. Maybe that's something that could be attractive or appealing for players who look at maybe a battleship and see how inconsistent the guns can feel, like the German battleships. Maybe this is a system that has very little RNG outside of the dot chance. Maybe this indicator is too big and they will narrow it down so a dive bomb can be more pinpoint accurate. Maybe I can precisely light up certain sections of the battleship or the cruiser, and I can follow up on a friendly who's used damage control. I don't know. I would love there to be a world where more information is just directly communicated to everyone, just automatically. Damage control, all these targets. I always envision a carrier as the player who can focus on someone who is vulnerable. Not someone who is completely full powered up. If you're going after someone who's full power, I think you should be less successful than a carrier player who can recognize the vulnerable targets. And I hope that that's the direction they go. I don't want this to just be, I can attack anyone I want, I can do whatever I want without any issue whatsoever. But we just don't know enough. We don't know enough. So one other thing you might notice is that there's a speed indicator for the aircraft. That was for a more controlled play by the player. They can get over to a target quick, they can get out of AA quicker, stuff like that. I assume that they're going to show that far more in the near future. It was just an animation example. And people are looking at the numbers. Don't look at the numbers. The numbers are ridiculous. It's AI controlled. They're not trying to use damage control. It's ridiculous to even consider that. But I do know carrier needs to be more involved. I would love for there to be a little bit more control in how the aircraft decide to return or avoid. I just feel like if you add in a couple more elements, just simple elements to the player to give them a little bit more of a ability to conceal what they're doing, I think the player base would be more responsive overall. Right now, it just looks like you are controlling aircraft and you just so happen to have a carrier that is not really controlled by anyone. And that's probably the biggest turnoff, is that it's so disconnected from what we currently can do with carriers that players are, a little perturbed. So let's move towards that. Let's make sure that the dots feel fair. It does look like the squadron attacks take about 20 seconds, 15 or 20 seconds. So that's a large enough window for someone to take significant flood damage if you cause a flood. Maybe you have to use damage control early. I don't know. All of this is really, really early, and it could be changed into a completely different system. We'll have to see. But my concerns are carrier, the overabundance of dots that seem to be associated with everything. I mean, if I go dive bomb, rocket, and torpedo, there's always a layer of dot that I can put on a target. So they basically will always be flooding or on fire from something that feels kind of cheesy, because everything that you do as a player to counter that, it just seems like it's a little too easy right now. So we'll see what they ultimately end up doing with all of that. But I'm very excited because visually this will draw players in way more. It's more compelling to watch. I know carrier gameplay was just hard to watch for a lot of people. This is not hard to watch. You're far more connected to the gameplay. It's far more visceral. I love that. I think you guys did a great job there, Wargaming. Let's just try and match the viciousness of some of these attacks with the strategic element, and I think we're honestly on the right path for success. Leave your comments. Tell me what you think. Be as real as you can be, and hopefully we can make this the best possible implementation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.